Welcome to Kindred, hosted by me, Kate, and my sister, Jen. In this podcast, we explore our human relationship to the natural world. In connecting to this planet, we also connect to understanding, compassion, and empathy. How can we see ourselves not as separate or above animals in nature, but a critical and integrated part of an active ecosystem? Through conversations with animal advocates, scientists, conservationists, and many others, we look to inspire a new awareness of how and why we connect to animals and nature in order to repair and restore our relationship to the natural world. Hello and welcome to Kindred, everyone. Good morning, Jennifer. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. Very excited. Wow, what an episode we have for you today. This is a dream come true to be able to speak with this person, and we are so grateful for his time. And we're honored and humbled and proud to be having this interview today. But just before we get into our guest, just a friendly reminder that you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Kindred Pod. You can find all our links and show notes to our guests and episodes on our website, kindredpodcast.co. And you can find us and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please rate and review us to help us get out there and into more ears. And this is one you are definitely going to want to share with friends and family. And with that, let me introduce you to our guest today. Are you ready, Jennifer?
I am.
All right, drum roll. So exciting. Today, we are speaking with wolf researcher and author Rick McIntyre. And I'll give you a bit of his bio from his publicist. So Rick McIntyre is the acclaimed author of the award-winning series Alpha Wolves of Yellowstone, which includes the book Rise of Wolf 8, The Reign of Wolf 21, The Redemption of Wolf 302, and The Alpha Female Wolf. So Rick worked as a ranger naturalist and wolf researcher for the National Park Service for 4 decades, including many years in Alaska's Denali National Park, where he first began to study wolves. In 1994, he became Yellowstone National Park's wolf interpreter, educating thousands of park visitors each year on Yellowstone's now famous Wolf Reintroduction Project. In 1998, Rick transferred to Yellowstone's Wolf Reintroduction Project full-time and helped with research on the park's wolf population. And when they say helped, let me just explain what that actually looked like. So Rick recorded over 100,000 sightings of wild wolves in Yellowstone.
Yes, you heard that right. 100,000.
Has watched wolves for more than 8,000 consecutive days in the park and counting. And I think that math equals almost 20 years. He has written over 12,000 pages of field notes on his wolf observations, making him one of the world's foremost experts on wild wolf behavior. So epic and incredible. And I just also wanted to mention prologues for the books were written by Robert Redford, Jane Goodall, and Mark Bekoff, who co-founded Ethologists for the Ethical Treatment of Animals with Jane Goodall. So the reason we wanted to speak with Rick is twofold. One, because of the extraordinary work Rick has done with and for the wolves of Yellowstone, doggedly documenting their lives and ultimately giving us the Alpha Wolves of Yellowstone series.
No, I was just going to say, just even hearing you say the titles of the books got me excited again because the books are so awesome. So after you listen to this episode, you're going to want to check out these books.
You absolutely are.
And you really are.
Yeah, and you'll see why he earns his title as wolf interpreter, because to me, he really is the voice of these incredible animals.
Yeah.
The other reason is because of his meticulous account of the wolves, we get to know them and they become not just wolves, but beings, right? Beings that we care deeply about. And we see clearly how much alike we are, which was really surprising to me. But Rick takes us so deeply into the daily lives of wolves,
Yeah.
and along the way, you're right there fighting for them and crying for them and celebrating them just as you would a friend or a family member.
Yeah,
Um,
it's almost like watching a movie, like listening to the books almost feels like it. Like you get to know the characters
yeah,
so well of who these wolves are because of Rick's vast and intimate knowledge of them. I mean, it just was sometimes we're on the edge of my seat. Like I couldn't wait to get back to
yeah,
finding out what was going to happen
yeah.
because he is exactly that wolf interpreter. Uh he earned that title.
Yeah. And sometimes I had to take a break because I was actually sobbing at points. And,
Exactly. Right.
you know, and on a personal note, the story of Wolf 21 and 42 really hit my heart because they remind me so much of my sweet dogs, Blue and Pip, who
Yeah.
were very bonded. And they also remind me of that lovely elderly couple you see sometimes and think,
Right.
I hope I'm like them when I'm very old. So let's head to Yellowstone National Park and our conversation with wolf interpreter Rick McIntyre. Rick McIntyre, thank you so much for joining us at Kindred today. We are absolutely thrilled to be speaking with you. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Sure. My name is Rick McIntyre, and I started working in Yellowstone National Park in 1994. Prior to that, I'd been a park ranger in many parks throughout the country, including Denali National Park up in Alaska, Glacier National Park in Montana, and for many winters in Death Valley National Park in the California desert. And I study wolves here in Yellowstone.
Well, we are so glad you do because just the amount of incredible work you've given us through your books, and we're so appreciative for you to be here today. So I just wanted to start with a tiny bit of history just to lay the foundation today. I believe it was by the 1920s, wolves had been hunted mercilessly to near extinction in Yellowstone. And by the 1970s, they were listed as endangered. So give us a bit of history about why in 1995 they were reintroduced into the national park and what were the deciding factors for bringing wolves back?
Sure. So we'll go over a little bit of history then. You may know that Yellowstone is the world's first national park. We invented that concept in America, and we just had our 150th anniversary. So
Wow.
if we could go back 150 years ago and visit Yellowstone, the gray wolf was very, very much a native animal. However, the early park rangers, like everyone else in the country in this would be the early 1900s, felt that wolves were no good and they needed to be exterminated.
Mm.
So the earlier rangers that were positioned here, it's hard to believe this now, but they had orders to kill every wolf in their district. If
Wow.
I had been a ranger back then, those would have been my orders. And just down the road from my cabin where I am right now, about, maybe 12 or 13 miles, this was back in 1923. The rangers that were stationed there found a dead bison. They encircled it with wolf traps. They came out the next morning. Two young wolves were caught in the traps. They were shot and killed. Those were the last native Yellowstone wolves. So
Oh
it
my
was a
God.
horrible mistake. Those rangers did exactly the worst possible thing they could have done. But back then, everyone wanted them killed. So
Mhm.
it wasn't unusual that that happened. But let's jump forward several decades. Eventually, our agency, the National Park Service, realized what a mistake that had been by the early rangers. And it took a long time, but finally, in very early 1995, We had got permission to do a reintroduction. We worked out a deal with people up in Canada, specifically Alberta. And on January 12th of 1995, we brought down the first batch of wolves to be reintroduced. That year, it was a total of 14 wolves, three different packs. Each one was put in its own acclimation pen to get used to Yellowstone and then released after 2 months. And for my purposes, for decades after that, began to follow and study the wolves, two of those three packs became very, very important founders for the Yellowstone wolf population. There was the Crystal Creek pack and the Rose Creek pack.
So, what were the deciding factors for bringing the wolves back? I mean, I've heard a little bit about how, Yellowstone's ecosystem was really out of balance. Is that was one of the biggest factors to get the wolves back as apex predators to rebalance the ecosystem there?
Well, certainly that was part of the story, but I would say number one, that we needed to bring back a native animal that had been deliberately exterminated. We can talk about how the wolves and the elk population relate here. When the wolves were killed off, the elk numbers exploded because there was no control over them.
Right.
That essentially was the relationship between the wolves and the elk. Um, so maybe one way to explain this is to say in our northern section of the park where I am, the carrying capacity for elk, for them to have a healthy number, healthy population, for them to be doing well, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000. It would be like if you had a ranch
Right.
and you consulted an expert and they said, well, your ranch can feed 6,000 cattle. If you have more than that, you're going to do damage. And after the wolves were killed off, the elk got to be maybe 20,000, so three times more than they should have been. And that meant that they were less healthy. A lot of them would die off if we had deep snow in the winter. It was a bad situation for the elk. So that, along with the fact that they were a native animal that never should have been killed off, those were the big reasons.
Yeah.
Well, and didn't it trickle down to the whole ecosystem? Like then they overgrazed and then, like plant species
Yes.
disappeared and things that people didn't really even think about at the time, right? And then it got so out of
Yes.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we could certainly get into a lot more detail, but we can go back to the analogy of a ranch with too many cattle. Yes, they would be doing a lot of damage to the vegetation. Specifically, that would include the aspen trees. So when there are too many elk, they have to start eating aspen seedlings, and
Uh-huh.
they eat them to the extent that they kill literally every one of them.
Oh, wow.
In those early years, just after the wolves arrived, there was a certain place I would lead visitors to on a hike and show them where you would easily have 10 or 20,000 aspen seedlings that were struggling to survive, and literally everyone had been grazed to death by elk. So
Mm.
that was the absolute proof of the overpopulation. Now, if I took you back to that same exact spot, it's like it's a dense forest that it is almost hard for a person to even walk through. It's like a bamboo forest. So it's night and day. And that's primarily due to the wolves and keeping the elk numbers in balance with the ecosystem and the food that's available to them.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, with that foundation laid, take us then to 1996 and the story of the first wolf packs that were reintroduced back into Yellowstone National Park. And I'm, of course, thinking specifically of like the Rose Creek pack, then the Druid pack.
Mhm.
Um, but talk to us about like what wolves stood out to you, and I'm thinking of the books that you wrote, of course, and of 8 and 9 and then
Mhm.
21 and their stories, but
Mhm.
talk to us about those early packs.
Mhm. Sure. Well, if we do it in order, chronological order, we've already talked about how in 95 the Crystal Creek wolves and the Rose Creek wolves were introduced. There was a second batch of wolves brought down from British Columbia in 96, and that included the Druid wolves. And we'll get to them in a few minutes. But let's go back to Crystal Creek wolves. Um, when I started watching that pack, there was one member that stood out, and he stood out in not such a great way because he was the runt of the litter. It was little number 8. So that pack consisted of the 2 parents and their 4 sons. And 8 really had a tough time growing up because he didn't fit in, he looked different, he had some other issues. He was the runt of the litter, and he just looked different. His father was jet black. His mother was almost white. His 3 brothers were all black, and he looked like a coyote, kind of a dull,
Oh,
drab, gray coat. And if you're a wolf, that's the last thing you want to look like, a coyote. Uh, when
right.
they were in the acclimation pens, which was about an acre, it was especially hard for him. He was in there for 2 months because his brothers didn't have much to do except harass the little guy. So they would
Right.
chase him, they would make him wait till he was the last one to eat. It was really a tough time. But after he got out of the pen, his life really began to change. And we began to notice that he had a lot more going for him than I thought. A quick story was he stood up to a grizzly bear
Wow.
and actually made the grizzly bear back off, even though the bear was many, many times his size. So he was a little guy, but when he was very young, he had already learned because of the bullying how to stand up for himself.
Right.
And that led to the next chapter in his life, which probably turned out to be the most important single event in the whole history of the reintroduction. He was spending a lot of time alone. He was a yearling, the equivalent of a human teenage boy. And we think that he heard some howling from a place where he didn't think that there were any wolves. What he didn't know was that one of the packs brought in at the same time as his, the Rose Creek pack, that family had gone through a lot of trauma. The
Mm.
mother wolf had been pregnant the first year. She gave birth to 8 pups,
Oh,
but
wow.
she then just slightly outside the border of the national park, and her mate was illegally shot and killed, probably
Wow.
on the very day that she gave birth to 8 pups.
Oh
Mm.
my
So
goodness.
it should have been a time of great celebration. Those were the first pup in Yellowstone in 69 years, but they had no father. The mother was desperate. She needed help. And very little chance that those pups were going to survive. The
Wow.
park biologists did what they could to help them. They captured the mother and the pups. They put them back in the acclimation pen so that they could be fed with elk and bison carcasses. So at least they'd be able to survive the first half year.
Right.
And that brings us to the point in their story where um, they were releasing the pups and the mother wolf. And guess who stepped into the meadow at that very time? Little Wolf
My
8.
hero, my hero. Yeah.
April 8th.
Wolf 8.
Yeah. So we think what happened was he heard the howling. He walks up there, he steps into a meadow, and he sees something that probably at first he couldn't believe because every day of his life, every day, he was always the very smallest wolf. And now he was seeing wolf pups for the first time.
Mhm.
And he was a yearling, essentially a teenager. So this was just an unbelievable experience for him. And
Right.
then what happened the next moment was such a critical event. He ran forward with apparently with a wagging tail and made friends with them. The mother
Oh,
wolf was watching from a distance. She was desperate. She needed help. She needed a guy in her life. Here was a
right.
guy. He was little. He was inexperienced. He didn't have much going for him. He wasn't the best looking guy in the world.
But he was willing. He showed up.
Little guy with a big heart. That's what you need.
Yeah, he was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was available and he was volunteering. So that day, he got a promotion. He went from the lowliest wolf in the park to an alpha male.
Yes.
And what a story. Huh?
Yeah.
Incredible. And
And
it's such a
one of
young,
those,
sorry, and he was only a yearling at that point. So is that young for an alpha, for a wolf to become an alpha?
yes, very, very young. And, certainly I think any of us would have said at the time that he didn't really have much going for him other than that sense of empathy that he had for the mother
Yeah.
wolf and the pups.
Right.
And he very quickly adjusted to his new life.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't know it at the time, but one of the eight pups in that litter was also destined for greatness. It was a little black male pup that would become known as 21. And the
Yes.
two of them, number 8 and 21, were destined to have a very special relationship. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the next spring.
Okay.
He joined the pack in the fall of 95, so now we're in the spring of 96. And that spring, um, number 8 became a biological father. So his mate gave birth to three pups. So now 8 had all this responsibility. He had to take care of his mate, his new little newborn pups, and all those yearlings. A
Yeah.
lot
Wow.
of responsibility.
It's a lot
And
of
one
food.
particular day, he was out trying to teach the what now were yearlings how to hunt. They made a kill, and he was getting ready to bring food back to his mate and to the new pups. He stopped, 8 stopped, and he looked at a ridge off to the west. And I thought, well, maybe he's seen another elk. And I looked there, and it was one of the other packs, a pack that had been brought in 96, the Druid Peak pack. And
Uh-huh.
that was a problem because the Druid wolves, for some reason, had become a very aggressive pack. In
Uh,
fact, so aggressive that their alpha male, number 38, had recently gotten in a fight with eight's father and killed him.
oh, wow.
And so now eight was in a situation where he was going to have to defend his family from an alpha male that was way bigger and stronger than he was, way more experienced, and the very wolf that had killed his own father. I
Right.
was with a bunch of visitors at that time, and I told them, eight probably has never won a fight in his life. The smart thing for him to do is to get out of there, circle around, get back to his mate and the new pups, and hope that 38 doesn't find him.
Right.
That's not what happened.
Mm.
Instead, when he realized what was going on, he charged toward 38. He ran directly at him. And it was like being a witness to David versus Goliath.
Mhm.
Yes.
And to make his challenge even more daunting, he had to run uphill a steep slope to even get to the fight.
Oh,
So
wow.
the big male was running downhill, he was running uphill. They smashed into each other. They were both gray. They rolled around on the ground. And then, as happens in almost all fights between alpha males, it was over in a few seconds
Right.
with the winning wolf standing over the losing wolf, and the way that one wolf kills another is just to bite the throat, and that's the killing bite. But David had won the fight. It was it was the little guy that won.
I have goosebumps. Like that must have been so crazy to watch that happen.
Even now, it's such an emotional story for me to tell.
Yes.
Um,
Well, but eight knew he grew up knowing, I guess all his siblings doing all that picking on him must have trained him and prepared for him for this very moment.
Yeah, I think you have it exactly right. So if you've lost a lot of fights, you can remember, well, what did the other guy do to beat me? And then you
Right.
just reverse that and do it to the other guy. So
Right.
just to continue that story for a few more moments, all those yearlings that he adopted, including 21, they ran up and they witnessed their adopted father in that great victory. They saw him biting the helpless 38. And then they saw what happened next, which was equally important. They
Yeah.
saw eight spare the life of the bad guy. He stepped back, let the guy run off, chased him out of the territory.
Oh,
And
wow.
21 was apparently very, very influenced by watching that because he grew up to be our undefeated, undisputed heavyweight champion. He never lost a fight, but based on what he saw 8 do that day, he never killed a defeated opponent.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, and that is such an interesting thing that they can that to as a human being to read that animals can witness behavior and learn from that, like that he was empathetic, and his son
Yes.
was also empathetic. He
Yes.
wasn't and that to me is just astounding that you actually
Yes.
witnessed that and chronicled that, because I didn't
Yes.
I
And
didn't know
so
that was a real
unexpected.
thing.
You would
Yeah,
never have expected to have gone that way. You would have thought 8, even
right.
because he's small and the underdog there, he would have absolutely had to have killed 38 to be successful. And
Yes.
the fact that he didn't,
Yeah,
Yes.
what one is relating is just an incredible story.
it really is.
Thing to add, I think, at this point is that there are no two species on Earth that are so similar in social behavior as humans and wolves. And the proof of that is how perfectly the domesticated version of the wolf fits into the human family, the dog.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, they, for anyone that has a dog in their home, their dog is essentially serving the position of a juvenile wolf in the family, where the dog sees the mom in the family as the alpha female and the dad as the alpha male, the kids in the family as the older siblings.
Right.
And so just like a kid who kind of has this hero worship of his father, I'm sure 21 kind of felt that way about this guy that adopted and raised him, that essentially saved his life. So he
Yeah.
wanted to be just like you up.
Mhm.
Right.
So that's the story of 8 and 21.
Amazing.
And so then take us then. Well, before we move on, I mean, you chronicled the story of 8 and his alpha female mate 9, and that whole story in called The Rise of Wolf 8, and it's the first of this series of books, and it's I of course all of these books we recommend. But then take us to 21 and his incredible story with just is unprecedented for me. I just think he is an absolute astounding animal.
Yes. Yes, it's such an emotional story to get into too. 21 never knew his biological father. However, he got his genetics from his dad. Um, his dad was a very, very large, very powerful, very strong alpha male. However, 21 got everything that he knew about being a male, being a father, being an alpha male by watching and learning from 8. So it was a very fascinating thing for us to witness. When he was about 2.5 years old, it was time for him to leave home. Now, that's called dispersing. That's normal. Like
Right.
people, wolves don't breed with close relatives. So the only females that 21 knew were in his own family. So he
Right.
took off, which is a dangerous thing. And by random chance, he walked into Lamar Valley, which was the home territory of the Druid pack, which essentially was the enemy of his family.
Right.
Right.
But 21 always had good luck over the course of his life. We don't think that he knew it, but 38, the alpha male who we've been talking about in the Druid pack had just died.
Right.
Mm.
And there were a whole bunch of adult females and pups in that pack that needed a guy in their life.
Right.
And suddenly they probably heard some howling, got the scent, and here comes 21 just strolling into their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And there's so much to say about the Druid pack. The original alpha female had been driven out of the family by one of her daughters. That was Wolf 40. And she's
Uh-huh.
going to be a main character in our story. So 40 attacked her own mother, drove her out of the family so that she could be the top dog.
Right.
And then she turned on her sister, 42, who had a very cooperative personality. Um, So 21 didn't know what he was walking into that day.
Right.
But they needed a guy. He showed up and he was in.
Yeah.
And he very much was drawn to 42, the compassionate sister.
Right.
And he did the best he could to protect her from 40. But even with 21 doing the best he could, two different springs, 40 killed her sister's pups,
Oh man.
which is the absolute worst thing that can happen in a wolf pack.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
she had this aggressive tendency in her. Uh, 42 wanted to get along with everyone. She wanted to cooperate with everyone. She wanted everyone to work together. That was her strength, her talent. And but she was forced to figure out how to deal with her sister. And
Right.
I'll try to condense what happened. The full version is told in The Reign of Wolf 21. She developed this brilliant strategy. She made an alliance with all the other females in the family, including the third sister, 41, and then the younger females in the family. And then in the spring of 2000, when many of them had just given birth to pups, 40 showed up at 42's den with the intent of, for a third time, killing her pups.
Oh, geez.
Whatever happened in a thick forest, and we just couldn't see what was taking place. But I came out the next morning and we found a wolf bleeding to death near the side of the road, a wolf that was just drenched in blood. I first assumed the worst, that it was 42, that she'd been killed by her sister. But no, it wasn't 42. It was the mean sister.
Oh
And
wow.
her body was just covered with wolf bites,
Yeah.
covered, meaning way, way more than just one opponent. So when we pieced everything together and I checked the information on the radio signals from the collared females, here's what we think had happened. That 42 had built this alliance of a number of other females in the family. And when 40 came for her, she had all those allies that were standing ready on her to join her side. We
Mm.
think the two sisters fought it out, but after a few moments, all of her allies jumped in, and now it was many females against the bad sister.
Yeah.
So
That makes
they didn't kill her, they allowed her to live, but she died of her wounds.
right.
So that story, that chapter of the alliance that 40 made was wild enough, but what happened next was even more profound and maybe even more emotional. Certainly, 42 would have been justified in going over to her sister's den and killing those pups,
Right.
because why should she take a chance that any of them might grow up to be like their mother?
Right.
We saw we saw 21 go over to 42's den. It was 5 miles away. He brought her back to 40's den because we think that he was desperate to keep those pups alive because they were starving due to lack of milk.
Right.
But as I was just implying, why wouldn't she just kill them and not have to worry about them growing up? She got, but it was in a very thick forest and we just couldn't see what was happening. What we could see is she got all the other females in the pack to move over there. There were several litters of pups. We watched that area day after day after day. And then finally, it took weeks, but we finally saw 42 step into an open meadow. As she walked across the meadow, a line of pups followed her along with the other mother wolves. And by the time they all went through, we had a count of 21 pups.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
just unbelievable seeing just going single file, marching in
Unbelievable.
military precision.
I can't even.
So she was raising her sister's pups
Yeah.
along with helping all the other mothers. What a story.
Because 21 ultimately had paired with 40, and so yeah, 21 was the alpha male and then 40 was the alpha female, And now, and just the chaos and the havoc that she created, because you're saying 21 was always really trying to support 42. And then, the fact that 42 now is accepting his, can we take care of all these puppies? It's just such a beautiful story
Yeah.
of just compassion
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
lovely, just a lovely story.
And I would say, after all my decades here, there probably was no other alpha male we've ever had here that could have done the job that 21 did that year, to go out
Yeah.
and hunt and make so many kills and bring back food and protect the family,
For
that they had those
21
survival.
puppies. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
But
God.
let me just say that although he did breed 40 that year, you could definitely see that the real love story was not 21 and 40. It was definitely 21 and 42. So they were meant to be a couple.
Yeah, and I wonder if 40 always knew that 21 and 42 were really the bonded pair, and it must have made her even more mad. So it's just interesting
Yes.
that
Yeah.
Oh,
constantly.
Yeah.
and that's what I thought when I read it, is that why one reason she killed the puppies, because she was so insecure that she had to,
Yes. Yeah.
do that.
We are going to take a quick break, and we will be back with more from Rick McIntyre and the Wolves of Yellowstone. Rick, before we get back to the wolf packs, I wanted to discuss with you what I've broken down into 3 critical aspects of pack life. And I think it's a perfect time to talk about this after, what you just talked about with 21 and 40 and 42. The first is play. The second is cooperative behavior. And the third is hunting. Because now that you've given us this window into these wolves' lives, I wanted to sort of highlight the importance of these aspects that you document in detail throughout your years of observation. So if we could just start with play, what role does it have in wolf families, and why is it so important?
Well, certainly it relates perfectly to what all of us experienced when we were kids, the importance of play in our life. It begins to socialize us. We begin to learn that we have to play fair with our playmates, that if we're too aggressive, if we happen to be bigger than them, we need to maybe hold back a little bit on our strength to make it fun. And so when you watch the pups play, they're just like dog puppies. That's all they want to do. They want to play, they want to chase, they want to wrestle, they want to trick each other by stealing each other's bones. And I'm sure they love play. It's probably their very favorite thing in the world. And the yearlings, who are just 1 year older than they are, they oftentimes will join in. And the older wolves, the mother, the father, other adults, they join in the fun too, not quite as much. But that's the value of having yearlings, are the equivalent of having in a human family teenagers. So they can be babysitters, they can protect the pups, and they can play. Plus, they go out and hunt and bring back food.
Right.
Now, with 21, he was probably the world's best dad in terms of wolves, because even though he was the heavyweight champion of Yellowstone, he was in the neighborhood of maybe 125 pounds, 130 pounds. That's a big wolf.
Wow.
And these pups, who are maybe 5 or 10 pounds, you see these little things that kind of look like kittens running around this big alpha male. And what 21 loved to do was to pretend. So he would pretend that he suddenly, for some reason, was afraid of the pups, and he would run off and they would chase him. And of course, he would run at about 10% of his speed, and they would catch up with him. And as soon as one little guy just had the slightest nip on 21's hind leg, 21 would flop down on the ground, that the mighty hunter had caught him and pulled him down, wrestled him to the ground. And he would get up and run off again, and they would pull him down once more. And then at times he would get into little wrestling matches, and it was pretty much the same process. You'd have this 125, 130 pound gigantic alpha male wrestling with a 10-pound pup, whatever. And as soon as the pup grabbed a front leg or reached up and grabbed a little bit of 21's fur, he would just flop down on his back in the defeated position. And the little guy would stand on top of his father with a raised tail. He had just defeated the heavyweight champion of the world. So you could see that there was no question that it was fun for the father wolf to do that, just like it's fun for a human dad. Like my dad and I did that. We would wrestle on the living room floor. And, I knew that he was letting me win. But I mean, it certainly was a bonding experience for me as a young boy with my dad. And I'm sure that's what it is for them as well.
Yeah.
So wolf fathers are great, great fathers. They're very involved in the raising of the pups, and all that goes toward the issue that they're learning how to work together as a team. And then when the pups are a little bit older, really their first winter, um, that teamwork is really critical because of two things that are going to be very important in the rest of their lives. They need to operate as a team when they're out hunting for large prey animals like elk and bison, and then
Right.
also work as a team if they have to fight a rival pack. We can go into those things in more detail later, but just to tie that in, the fun of the games really are for the purpose of training the pups for those two very critical things when they're older in life.
That's right. And it really does seem to, because just reading your books, like all of the wolves, like the pups and the yearlings and the betas and the alphas, they all play and they do, you talk about play bows and
Yes.
sparring and,
Mhm.
using sticks as toys. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it 42 that used a stick as a toy to get
Yes.
some of her pups across a river? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, right. Trick
Yes.
them by play. Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she just
Yes.
was so patient and so kind, and just that building of like the strength for the pups, and like you were saying, like the pups will take down 21, and that fuels their like, oh, we can take down our prey, and it sort of teaches
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
And then you just
Mhm.
talk about the sheer joy that they experience playing, which I just
Yes.
found really beautiful. Um,
Yes.
and I loved your detailed accounts of that. And that, like you said, that goes again, thinking about play, then that leads me to cooperative behavior, which I think is very, like you're saying, it's so closely connected. So, what is it about this aspect, the cooperative behavior, that is so critical to a wolf pack success?
Well, there's so much to say, but why don't we begin by talking about the fact that wolves have evolved to be a social species, meaning that they cooperate as a team to raise pups, to hunt and feed the family, and then to defend the family and the territory from rival packs. So all those things relate very well to human evolution, human behavior, human history.
Right.
Pretty much the same stuff as us. So the better bonding you have within a wolf family, the better they're going to be able to cooperate when they're doing those other functions. That's why in the years when 40 was in charge of the pack, it was such a dysfunctional family.
Right.
Um, I guess I never exactly thought of it this way, but it's just coming to mind now. You can make a good argument that she was probably the most selfish wolf that I've ever known, and I've
Interesting.
Mhm.
known thousands of
Yeah.
Right.
them. So everything was about her and her pups, and she didn't really care about anyone else.
Yeah. Which goes against the whole way they live, right? That's a very collaborative. You thrive if you collaborate. Yeah.
Yes. So essentially, if you're in a wolf pack, it's like within that pack, the members, the mantra is it's us against the world. So we have to
Right.
cooperate together. We have to figure out a way to work together. We're going to have our feuds, we're going to have our arguments, we're going to have our issues and stuff. But when it really counts, we have to put all that stuff aside and operate um, as a well-run team. Especially, it's like in warfare. You have to train the new recruits to obey the leader and to go into battle.
Yeah. And then that leads me to hunting, right? I mean, I see hunting as that space where we see that reciprocal relationship between wolf, prey animal, landscape, and other species of flora and fauna. And it's where we see in action the role they play as an apex predator and the critical impact that they have on the health of the ecosystem, like we were talking about at the very top of this conversation, that they live in Yellowstone. And so talk to us about the hugely positive effects wolves and their hunting abilities have in their ecosystem in Yellowstone.
Mhm. I think we've already touched upon earlier how when all the original wolves were killed off, we had a huge overpopulation of elk. That was bad for the health of the elk themselves, bad for the environment, bad for the vegetation.
Right.
So you could say in the big picture, ecologically, one of the functions of having an apex predator like wolves back in Yellowstone is they moderate the number of elk and other prey species, generally speaking, to a level that's going to be in keeping with what the park can support. Also, they, I guess I'll say, unknowingly do the job of reducing infectious diseases. I was
Right.
just reading a website where they talked about how easy it is to train dogs to sniff out whether a person has COVID or not.
Right.
And dogs can easily be trained to determine if a person has cancer.
Right.
I never in a million years would have thought that cancer cells give off a scent that dogs can detect, but
Right.
they can. It's
Yeah.
very easy to train them to do that. You give them a reward when they home in on that and alert you to it.
Right.
Um, so where does that come from? Well, it comes from their wolf ancestors.
Right.
I'll give you an example. There was one male wolf that found a girlfriend who he knew was way smarter than him. Of course, that happens all the time. And so he led her a lead. They were hungry. They hadn't eaten in a while. They came into the area where there are hundreds and hundreds of elk. The elk were standing everywhere. And I thought, well, they're just going to start chasing the elk. No. The female instead ignored all the elk, put her nose to the ground. She sniffed around, found something that apparently she found interesting. It was a scent trail of one particular elk. She followed that scent track, excuse me, on this very circuitous route. She ignored the hundreds and hundreds of other elk that were just standing there and watching because they knew that they were safe because she
Wow.
was on the trail of one particular elk that she knew was going to be an easy target. It must have been some disease, some sickness,
Yeah.
infection, whatever it was. He followed her dutifully, the male wolf. After maybe a mile, the female stopped. She looked ahead at a small group of trees. I didn't see anything there, but apparently she had figured out, okay, the elk has to be there. They charged into the trees. Sure enough, an old cow elk ran out, and within a minute, they had killed her because she was so slow and so decrepit. So
Yeah.
they totally ignored the healthy elk because they knew there's one over there that's going to be easy for us. So if you were a pup in that family, you would have at least sniffed that same scent trail and you would have memorized that smell. And all you would know in your mind is, okay, that smell is probably going to mean an easy hunt, an easy meal. That's all
Right.
you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you've talked about this a lot in your books, how after often you and your team will go out and retrieve that killed bison or elk, and you'll do a little necropsy, and you'll find that there's decay in the mouth, or there was some kind of
Yes.
disease that the elk or
Yes.
bison had, and you got, again affirmed over and over again that these wolves are taking out the sick and infected and diseased elk, and it's their way of keeping, that's actually helping that herd, that prey herd, stay healthy. And
Yes.
it's just an incredible reciprocal relationship that they have. And I think that the hunting is, and you talk about it a lot in your books, and I think that's why often wolves get a bad rap about being these vicious bloodlust killers, and they're just not. They're picking off the ones who are actually probably going to die soon and possibly even in pain, and they're doing that whole herd a huge favor. So we're going to take another quick break, and we will be right back. Rick, if we could just go back now to the pack stories, and just getting back to Wolves 21 and 42 specifically, they have just such an incredible, beautiful story. How long did these two actually get to live the happy, balanced pack life after a lot of drama and a couple of hard years?
Well, it's a great romantic story. They grew old together. They
Aw.
they both were born with jet black fur, and at about the same pace, they turned gray together.
Wow.
So we would see them. They lived to be almost 9 years old, whereas the average
Wow.
age is only 5, so almost twice as long as the average wolf. They
Wow.
met, I think, when they were maybe 2.5 or something like that.
Wow.
So they were together for the vast majority of their time. And it was kind of like, some people have grandparents that the older they get, the more they look like each other and the
Yeah.
more they're devoted to each other.
Right.
And that was their story. That as the years went by, um, it's normal for some of the younger adults to leave the family. Of course, the parents stayed, so they had several generations of pups that were always with them, but um, they were so much older than the others. So probably toward the end, they were at least twice as old as the next oldest wolves.
Wow.
And I can't really spoil the details of what happened at the end, but I think what I can say is the mating season is in February,
Right.
and I'm so grateful that, and I hope I can get through this story, that I got to see them for the last time. It was so touching because the mating process for wolves can go on for 30 minutes.
Right.
And they both were lying down. And he very gently put his front right paw over her shoulder like this as they were in the mating act. It was very emotional.
Yeah.
And of course, they had done it many times before, but to see such an old couple that were still attracted to each other, that we're still getting ready to have one more crop of pups.
Right.
And I think this is the way that I'm going to have to say this because again, I can't really spoil the emotion of the story. Let's just say that soon after that, as far as 21 knew, his longtime mate got lost. He couldn't find her. And he spent the next few months looking for her. And during those months, he deteriorated very rapidly. And I got the sense that he was just losing his desire to keep on living.
Right.
And he did something at the very end that just was the perfect conclusion to his life story. I remember the first time that I realized what had happened. I had a woman friend visiting me, and I needed to tell someone the story to see if I could explain it properly to a person and see how someone that didn't really know the details, how they would react to hearing what 21 did at the end of his life. So I got to that point and I just stopped expecting her to say, well, yeah, that's a good story. You should do it that way. But she didn't say that. In fact, she couldn't speak because she was sobbing uncontrollably. And guys can't handle that. And so I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? I said something terrible. So I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Why are you crying? And it took her several minutes to get her composure. And she finally blurted out in between sobbing this sentence. She said, why can't I find a man like 21?
Yeah. Shame. Yeah.
And that's a pretty good summary of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shame.
Yeah. He was a beautiful wolf, and so was 42.
Yes.
It's an incredible ending to their story, and it's really beautiful. So yeah, I would say please get the books and read the story, because we're only dipping into little bits of the absolute beauty of their lives and their stories. And you know it's why we're so grateful that you are retelling this to us now, and that you wrote all this down. And we're not done. It's still, more pack stories, and your telling of Wolf 302 and 480 in The Redemption of Wolf 302, and then the incredible book you wrote on alpha females, and highlighting '06, which you write in The Alpha Female Wolf. Take us from we kind of move into the future here. So if you could talk to us a little bit about 302.
Well, 302 was a great wolf for us to study and witness his life story, because prior to 302, we were kind of assuming that all adult males, certainly all alpha males, were going to have pretty much the same traits and characteristics and heroic behavior of 8 and 21.
Right.
Well, guess what? Guess what?
Not all the
No.
time.
Not all the
Just like
time.
humans, not all.
So 302 was born to 21's sister. He actually looked a lot like his uncle,
Okay.
but he had a totally different personality and character. So if 21 was the epitome of male responsibility, his nephew was at the opposite end of the spectrum. He was the boyfriend that your mother warned you about.
Yes, that's the right way to say it.
And so 302 had genetics. So when he was a young adult male, there's no other way to say it. He was just drop dead gorgeous. And all the girls flocked to him.
Right.
And he was a playboy. He certainly took advantage of that.
Yeah.
And but certainly part of the story was that he had an extremely short attention span.
Aha.
So he'd be with one girl, then the next girl, and then the next girl, and didn't really have any sense of commitment or any of those nice words. So the total opposite of 21 and 8.
Right.
And the first year that he showed up, he came into his uncle's territory, got a lot of 21's daughters, abandoned them. And then that year, 21 had to raise not only his own sons and daughters, but many sons and daughters that were sired by his no good nephew. And then, and in a way, it was almost like watching a comedy, because 302's priority was first to get all the girls, and then secondly, to make sure that no harm would ever come to him.
Right.
So there were times where rival wolves would see 302 with some of his girlfriends, and they would charge, and 302 would run off to save himself and just abandon his girlfriends, whereas 21 would have stood there and fought to the death to protect them. 8 would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was humorous to see his behavior. So he just cared for himself, didn't care about anyone else. And there's so many stories to tell about 302, but after 21 died of old age, ironically, his nephew and then an associate of 302, Wolf 480, joined the Druid pack. Initially, 302 was the new alpha male, but he did such a terrible job that his nephew, the younger male, 480, had to intervene into the situation. They had an intervention.
Right.
And so he took over the top position from the older wolf, which was a good deal for 302. Then he could do whatever he wanted. So he would just take off in the mating season,
Yeah.
visit his girlfriends, all the surrounding families, come back when he felt like it. He would
He didn't
come and
want the
go.
responsibility anyway, right? He didn't want,
That's
he didn't want all
exactly right.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Period. In 302's life was when he developed a phobia. And the phobia he had for a wolf was just such a weird situation. He became terrified of dead bull elk.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we would see that the pack would kill a bull elk. They would all be feeding, and 302 would kind of walk on the scene. Of course, he didn't have anything to do with helping them make the hunt.
Right.
And he just didn't like to be anywhere near a dead bull elk. But he eventually overcame that phobia. And somehow that was the beginning of the turnaround in his life. And it was just an unbelievable thing to witness
Yeah.
that he slowly took on more responsibility. He slowly matured in life. He eventually settled down. He formed his own pack. He was an alpha male. He was raising pups. He was doing a great job. Um, he totally turned his character around 180 degrees. I've never seen anything like it in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Um, and like 21 Story, I don't think it's fair to explain exactly what happened at the end of his life. But I can say that in just this unbelievable sequence of events, he sacrificed his life for his family.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
Yeah.
for 302
yeah.
to have that at the climax of his life, that essentially the worst wolf that we've ever had here in terms
Right.
of responsibility, that he
Yeah.
turned his life around in such a degree that he sacrificed his life to save his family, and that sacrifice worked.
Yeah.
It just was a unbelievable story for us to witness.
A story of redemption, a true redemption story. And maybe more powerful too, because he went against his nature to become better than he was. That's pretty impressive.
So then in your last book of the series so far, you take us to the alpha female wolf, where you highlighted a lot of the alpha females in the packs, and specifically O6, who to me is again just such an exemplary uh, animal, and just her way and her choices and the way she moved through her life. Tell us about O6.
Of all the females we've ever had, I would say was the most independent during um, the first half of her life.
Right.
Um, she left home when she was young.
And she could take down an elk on her own. So she really was a
Yes,
force to be
yeah,
reckoned
yeah, totally self-sufficient, independent, strong-willed, physically strong
with.
adult
Yeah.
female.
And then eventually she found 755 and 754, and they created an incredible pack together, didn't they?
Yeah, and that part of her story was so strange because I've said that these big, strong, experienced males, older males, just lined up for her. She rejected them all, and then she met these two brothers who were less than half her age. They were very inexperienced. They knew nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing that we could see that justified her choosing them, but she saw something in them. And we'll talk maybe a little bit later about how we finally realized she made the right choice. But just to have a little bit of fun with that story. So again, she was middle-aged. They were the equivalent of two brothers that maybe were sophomores in high school. Does that sound like a good plan? A good
No,
match? Uh,
not at all.
She knew something we didn't.
and
Yeah.
yeah, what what's that term in human endeavors if you have kind of an older woman and a much younger
You call
boyfriend
her
who
a
has the same?
cougar. They call them
Yeah, yeah,
cougars.
she
Yes.
yeah, she invented that thing. Yeah, yeah.
Very smart.
So yeah, those were the guys for her.
Yep.
Oh,
And once she made that decision, that was it for the rest of her life. That was the deal. So she had her first litter of pups that spring. She was great mother. She would defend them from grizzly bears. She would make kills. And then she switched to a different den the next couple of years. Um, she had a rival, a another alpha female in a very, very aggressive pack. And when she had a later litter of pups, that alpha female came for her with her entire pack. I believe it was a total of 17 wolves marched into O6's den site just a few days after she had given birth. The other alpha female hadn't gotten pregnant that year. The den was in a thick forest, so we really couldn't see what was going on. And then suddenly, out of those trees, we saw this huge mob of wolves just running at full speed. Out in front of the mob was O6. It had only been a few days since she had her pups, so she couldn't run at full speed, and she was being pursued by 17 wolves, including her enemy. And we quickly realized that she'd made a terrible tactical mistake because she was running in the direction where she was going to end up at the top of a cliff.
Mm.
And she was going to have to turn around there and by herself fight the 17 wolves. It was like watching an Indiana Jones movie
Yeah.
where
Oh my
they're
gosh.
chasing him to the top of the cliff.
Right.
But as had happened before, I had underestimated her. Apparently, she had already planned an escape route. And even though there was a cliff there, I saw that there was a little bit of a chute that wasn't quite as steep, and she ran down that.
Oh,
I
wow.
think she tore up her paws because it was all full of sharp rocks. But it was so dangerous that the enemy wolves did not want to take the chance
Yeah.
of chasing her down there. So she saved herself, but her newborn pups were now between her and the enemy. But she had picked those two young males to serve her. They both had radio collars. I had my telemetry equipment. I checked for their signals, and I could tell from the direction of the signals that they were stationed essentially in front of the den.
Wow.
Now, that was all in the forest, so I couldn't see what was happening. But the
Right.
enemy pack turned around, ran straight toward the den. I think their intent was to kill the pups.
Yeah.
So it was going to be 17 wolves against the two males that she picked.
Right.
We couldn't see what happened. In Yellowstone, the number one cause of death for adult wolves is to be killed by rival packs. So that's a very common cause of death here. We
Right.
couldn't see what was happening. And after about an hour of us being totally on edge and totally stressed out,
Right.
the enemy pack left. Took out my telemetry equipment. I got the signals from the two males from exactly the same direction, meaning that they were still there.
Right.
But here's the problem. The way that the wolf radio collars work is they have a motion sensor in the collar. If the motion sensor detects that there's been no motion, the
Right.
beats per minute double. It was the regular signal, but it's programmed that it doesn't double until there's been 4 hours of an activity
Right.
because like a dog napping, the wolf
Right.
isn't going to be moving.
Yeah.
But it got dark and there was nothing I could do, so I headed home. The 4 hours weren't up. I came out in the morning. I could check as I was driving. So I checked for 754, the beta male. His
Yeah.
signal was normal.
Oh
I
gosh.
checked for 755, the alpha male. His signal was normal. Over the next days, we saw 06, we saw the two males, we saw the younger adults, and we saw all the pups.
So
So those two guys stood between 17 wolves and the newborn pups. And
wow.
somehow they not only protected the pups, but they survived what happened during those hours. So
Incredible.
did she pick the right guys? Yeah, she picked the right guys.
You sure
Wow.
did.
How could she see that in
Yes.
essentially two teenage boys?
Right,
But
right.
And
boy,
how did they not
she
get attacked though? How did those other wolves, like, how did they keep them at bay? I mean, it didn't seem like they were injured. That's so crazy. Like they just, wow.
It
Yeah.
must have, yeah, they must have stood shoulder to shoulder, growling and snarling,
Yeah,
essentially giving off the message that
yeah,
um, if
Don't
you want to
bother.
come at us, fine, but we're going to fight you to the death.
yeah,
Yeah. Whew.
yeah.
And
Yeah, it just must have
I'm
not been
sure
worth
that
it
they,
to the other pack. It just must have not been
yeah,
worth it, I guess, in the
that's
end,
right.
because they
Yeah,
stood their ground so strongly. But
Oh
yeah,
my
wow.
gosh.
yeah,
You
yeah,
must have been so stressed out. I can't imagine not knowing what was
I don't know
happening.
how you got. I guess you have to sleep at some point, but I would have. I don't know. I would have laid awake all the entire night. Oh my gosh.
yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. What a story. Huh?
Yeah, you've
Uh-huh.
got a lot of good ones, that's for sure.
Well, and I love the alpha female wolf too, because it's really also where you talk a lot about how all through your years of observation, you realize that the alpha female is really the one who sets the tone and is the leader. And it's a
Yes. Hmm.
beautiful book about, again, cooperative behavior and all these things and how the alpha female
Yes. Hmm.
plays and the alpha male. That just, it's such a beautiful symbiotic relationship. And just though that how the alpha female wolf is actually the leader. And again, with '06, she's such a beautiful example of beauty and smarts and all of the things that she, again, how much we can relate to these animals. And, you know, I would love to actually end our conversation talking about that, like how alike we are to wolves, like through the years of consistent and accumulated observations of these incredible animals, we get real window into their inner world. And without your absolute dedication to accounting for the wolves, we wouldn't see how critical and beautiful they are and why we should really care about their welfare and success as a species. And from your perspective, I mean, Jen and I've talked about this a lot, like how much we could relate not only to the wolves, but also how we relate to our dogs that we have in context to these stories. But from your perspective, how do you think we're similar, and why is it important for us to understand that?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned or made a reference to your dogs. So I think it's pretty likely that, whatever dogs you have, whatever dogs listeners have at home, if any of you were walking in the woods with your dog and a grizzly or a lion or something came along, your dog would probably be willing to fight to the death to protect you, just like 755 and 754. So all the traits that humans admire in their pet dogs, all the traits that, especially that loyalty, um, all that comes from their wolf ancestors.
Right.
So if you like dogs, if you respect and admire dogs, then you should feel the same way about wolves because that's where all that comes from.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. We know these stories, and hearing them again, though, it's like hearing them for the first time. And, you know, please, for our listeners, we urge you to buy and read his books. We only touched on a bit of these incredible, beautiful stories. So, Rick, where's the best place to buy your books? Do you have a preference of how we might do that?
No, it doesn't matter to me. Of course, they're all up on Amazon.
Okay,
Um, They have, of course, many of the reviews from other wolf biologists. I don't think we've mentioned it, but Jane Goodall wrote the introduction to the Alpha Female book. And
that's right.
so yeah, what she has to say, by the way, she says that if her life had turned out different, she would have been a wolf biologist rather than a chimpanzee biologist. So that was
Interesting.
fascinating.
I believe
Um,
it.
so certainly Amazon. I also like to support local bookstores, independent stores. So whatever works for people is fine with me. We
Yeah,
we
no.
also have audio versions of the books that people seem to like.
Well, Rick, thank you again so much for joining us. I can't wait to read that book. So very much enjoyed your books. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so
Well,
much.
it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun with you girls. Thank you.
I'm glad because it was really great for us. We're so grateful. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Takeaway. We just had two kind of highlights that I thought was important to emphasize. And the first one was, I loved Rick's response to that question we ask all our guests, like, why is this an important conversation? Why is this an important subject? And he talked about our dogs. And it really hit me again that without wolves, we wouldn't have our canine companions. We wouldn't have dogs. And I just think that it's another reason why we really owe it to wolves to care about their experience. And I just thought that was such a great connection that he made.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that sort of the gratitude to the predecessors too. It's like, it just made me be like, oh yes, that's right. Like everything adorable and loyal and cute about our dogs comes directly from these animals. Yeah.
Yes. And you can see reading the books, when you guys read the books, like you will see what we're talking about on such an intimate level. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, my dog does that. And we talked about how the wolves play with sticks and play with each other. It's like they play with each other like we play with our dogs. It's like we're all so similar. And it's why we relate so deeply to our dogs. So that's just so beautiful. And just again to emphasize, I've never felt so alike to another species before after reading these books and talking with Rick. They're just so epic, and because of the life he has dedicated to witnessing the lives of these wolves, and we didn't cover it in the interview, but he watches them from about a mile or so away, and it's been a question, have they known he was there? And it's very little interaction with them, actually, almost none. And the fact that he was able to interpret for us and be the voice for them for just his visual observation is just a testament to how deeply he understands these animals.
Right. And the precise attention he paid to their behavior, like we understand their personalities. Like they have very different personalities, and he knows that. Like he conveys that because of this, what did you say, 8,000 and something days in a row, which is, where he gets up sometimes before at 3 a.m. to go be at the right place at the right time. And just that selfless service that he, and I mean, it's his job, yes, but I just feel like he takes it to a level, the dedication that he has shown is just like incredible. It kind of blows my mind that he hasn't missed a day.
I know. And I think
what have I done straight for 15 years? Nothing.
So just breathe. That's all I know. I've done the same. Yeah. So yeah, it really is so epic. So again, thank you to Rick McIntyre. And just a little sort of information. You can find Rick's series, The Alpha Wolves of Yellowstone, on Amazon. You can also find them through greystonebooks.com. And honestly, you just need to Google his name and he comes right up with many links to his books and articles and documentaries. And of course, again, all the links will be in our show notes on our website, kindredpodcast.co. And again, please share this episode with your friends, family, and coworkers, because, the epic dedication that he has to the Wolf Project and these beautiful lives of these wolves in Yellowstone, because of that work, we get to experience this now like we never would before. And I feel like, he is their voice, and it's like we almost owe it to them. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks so much to Rick McIntyre. Thanks to Yellowstone National Park and all those dedicated to the Wolf Project. And deep respect to Wolves 8 and 9, 21 and 42, 302 and 06, and all the wolves still forging their way in Yellowstone. See you next time, and lots of love. Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find links to our socials, Patreon page, and show notes.